Hi guys and girls, I'm Ant and welcome to the latest episode of Q&Ant. As most of you will be aware by now, this is the series where I take a whole bunch of suggestions, topics, questions and just about everything else and put it all together into a video and discuss it. Now before we get to all of that, I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who supports me and helps me out via Patreon as well as being a YouTube member. It really is a big deal, it means a massive amount to me. It really does help this channel be the best it can be, and to be perfectly honest, without you, I wouldn't be anywhere. I wouldn't be able to do the things I do here. Of course, this video series is for everyone as well. Whilst I do take the questions from supporters and sponsors, it's basically for everyone to watch. I don't want to lock it behind a paywall. But that said, if you are interested in taking a look at either Patreon or becoming a YouTube member, you can basically check out the pages. There's a join button below this video, you can have a look at that. Alternatively, do have a look at the Patreon page that is linked in the video description. Anything you do is utterly appreciated. Like I say, it really does mean a lot. So then, let's get on with this particular episode. We've got a few topics to address, let's get to it. So the first topic comes from Victoria. She's saying, do you think that the large amount of time needed for the next release is partially due to the rewriting the core of the game to enable faster releases and fewer bugs? So at this point, I'm about 80% convinced that the 2020 update will indeed, to some degree at least, be a rewrite or a refactoring of the core code. Now, if this is to be a thing, I suspect there would be a number of reasons for it. So my take on this, and do keep in mind this is purely speculation, my take is that the game is currently suffering from a number of significant problems. One of the biggest of these issues is the networking, and there are many examples of where the networking has caused Elite major problems, from regular instancing issues to broken multi-crew systems that has had ongoing unresolved issues ever since its original release. Now, the September update showed that the game is likely in an extremely unstable state as well, with any changes also introducing show-stopping bugs. Even minor things such as the introduction of decals are causing the game to crash, and from one point of view, some people may use all of this to suggest that Frontier are extremely incompetent. Personally, I do not agree with that, not at all. I think the issue here is that the game itself is in a very difficult state, and even small additions or changes to the code can have huge unforeseen consequences. Basically, I get the impression that the code has become spaghettified. It's very difficult to unravel. So add on top of that Frontier's desire to add space legs into the game, and it really starts to become pretty clear that the game needs a significant rework. Now, this is all speculation, of course, but when you consider that development of the next big update began in mid-2018 and will complete at the end of 2020, that equates to 2.5 years of full development time, and that's longer development than most of Frontier's full games, and it's also far longer than it took to create the initial release of Elite Dangerous. So yeah, I do think that a rewrite or some sort of significant rework is definitely going on here. Now, Commander Jinx says, did I read any of the Elite Dangerous or the Elite Universe books, and which are my favourite ones? So I actually haven't read many of the Elite novels. I have read Reclamation by Drew Wager, which I really did enjoy, and if you have any suggestions of an Elite novel that I should try next, do let me know. Stuart says, with all the problems of late with Elite Dangerous, do I think that there is any real danger of Elite being overtaken and left behind by other games such as Everspace 2? Do I think that Frontier can recover from the situation and go on to even bigger and better things, or is the game in danger of stagnating and losing its player base? So personally, I feel that the long-term future of Elite has the opportunity to be very good indeed. Frontier are clearly investing into Elite, putting 2.5 years of development time into the 20 update. Is a significant undertaking, and whilst we don't know what the content of that update will be, it's nonetheless very clear that Elite is still important to Frontier. My real concern though is for the game during the next 12 months. Whilst fleet carriers are likely going to arrive in mid-2020, it still nonetheless leaves the player base with little to no content between now and then, and there's a very real chance that some or even a lot of the player base will move on in the meantime. However, there's certainly two counterpoints to this. Any of Elite's competitors, such as Everspace 2 or even Star Citizen, are a long way off yet, and Everspace 2 will be going into early access in late 2020 and won't have a full release until late 2021. So this gives a huge window for Frontier to release at the 2020 update without having to really worry about any significant competition. Secondly, even with most of the player base leaving, or even if most of the player base did leave the game between now and then, or now and the end of 2020, the vast majority would certainly return for the update. There's pretty much no doubt about that. So really that brings us on to another subject, which is a common misconception that Elite makes most of its money from the currently active player base, and this really isn't true at all. The majority of Elite's income comes from sales of new copies of the game. For example, in the financial year 2019, new sales of Elite accounted for £12 million. Cosmetic items, meanwhile, accounted for £4 million in 2018. So whilst that's not a same-year comparison, it does highlight where most of the revenue actually comes from. It's also worth adding that each time an update is released, it sees a spike in both returning players and new players. In my view then, the risk for Elite isn't that its long-term future is in potential jeopardy, which I actually think the future of Elite is going to be fine, but rather the issue is how things will go during the next 12 months. Veruna asks if I believe there's a possible link between Elite's 2020 update and the pending launch of the PlayStation 5, which should roughly be around about the same time, I guess. So my suspicion is that there is likely a connection here, and that Elite could end up a launch title for both the new PlayStation as well as the Xbox. That said, simultaneous releases on multiple platforms isn't usually something that Frontier have done in the past, so it's entirely possible that they would actually choose a staggered release. That said, I'm pretty confident that a large reason for the 2020 update is to bring the game up to date so that it can take advantage of the increased power of the next generation consoles as well as modern PCs. Chris says, do I think Frontier's fixes for the next few releases will be bugs only, or do I think there will be a reward balance tweaks as well? So I'm also hoping that the game will get some balance fixes with the next updates. It's certainly something that is much needed, and to be honest, I'd be somewhat disappointed if Frontier don't at least rebalance a few areas of the game. Combat rewards, for example, are an obvious area that needs looking at here, so yeah, definitely it's something I want to see. Whether or not Frontier choose to do it though, is something we'll have to wait and see. Now, Neil, Jared and Bruce all have very similar questions to each other here, all basically wondering at what sort of bugs and fixes that should be going into the game over the next year or so. So, having a look at the issues tracker for Elite Dangerous, it currently shows well over 4,500 bug reports. Now, I have no idea how this compares to other games, and to be fair, bugs are of course to be expected, and I'd imagine that the more players a game has, the more bug reports it actually receives. However, there are some fairly significant issues that have affected a lot of players over the years, many of which remain, or at least some of which remain unresolved. For me, the biggest issue with bugs isn't that there is any one particular game-breaking bug, but rather that any time Frontier release an update, it often breaks something. In fact, I don't think there's been an update where something hasn't broken. Whatever the reason for this is, I have no idea, and it's far from ideal. That said, Frontier have committed to fixing this. The fact that it's going to take so long might hint to the extent of the issue. However, there's also another potential factor involved that not really a lot of people seem to discuss. Maybe Frontier feel that the 2020 update will fix many of the long-term issues, and the reason for the lengthy bug fixing period is to allow enough time to get that 2020 code placed into the game, rather than actually any new code in the meantime. I guess we'll have to see. Now, Richard is wondering what my take on No Man's Sky is with the latest updates, and maybe what my view is on what to expect for the future. So yeah, Hello Games have done some seriously impressive work with No Man's Sky. Their update schedule has been absolutely great, and the amount of new content added each time has been significant. In a June interview with Games Industry Biz, Sean Murray said the following: "We're in a nice position now, and I think this is the happiest the team has been. Beyond is on the horizon for us, and we're working very hard on that at the moment, which of course has now been released. And after that, I think we'll continue to update No Man's Sky. But the thing I learnt is that I never like making promises when I don't have to. We'll see. As long as people are interested in playing it, and it's something that the team here are passionate about, we'll only do it while we think there are fun and interesting things to add. So personally at this point, I'm not sure what to expect from the future of No Man's Sky. I'd be surprised if there isn't at least one more significant update though, to be honest, and what that could be, however, I really couldn't guess at. There's so much in the game already after all. But that said, I would really like to see some more traditional forms of trading put into the game. Cargo hauling and trading, that's a similar fashion to Elite, the original Elite that is, as well as Frontier Elite 2 would be a nice addition. Or even trading, similar to what could be found in the X series. This would be something that would make a real nice addition to No Man's Sky, I feel. Now, Spidey says if Frontier are delaying the release of carriers, he wonders what would give if Frontier would give us more details on them. So my short answer to this would be no. I doubt Frontier would give any more details. My longer answer is that, as with everything with Frontier, they will release info when they are ready to do so. So in my opinion, I believe that the carrier delay is nothing to do with bug fixing as such, but rather that there was some type of problem with implementing the carriers. So whether that's due to carriers themselves or whether it's due to other issues with the game, we'll likely never know. But the fact that Frontier stated they will use the additional time to improve fleet carriers seems very, very odd. I mean, think about this. They announced all of this delay literally 6 to 8 weeks before carriers were due to be released. And by that time frame, the design of carriers should have been locked in place with only testing really and fixing left to do. So the very fact that they've said we're going to delay carriers and implement them later on, but use that time to make additional improvements really speaks volumes. It seems to me at least that carriers couldn't have been fully implemented or fully finished yet. At this point then, carriers have been so long in the making that I suspect they have gone through many different iterations. The carriers we ultimately end up with are likely not the ones that Frontier originally envisioned. So bottom line then, the very fact that carriers seem to be in a state of flux is the very reason I doubt we'll hear any new information on carriers for quite a while yet. But you never know, I guess. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Q&Ant. Again, thank you so much for everyone's support over the last few months and over the last few years. It really does mean a huge amount to me. And again, if anyone does want to check out either Patreon or the YouTube members section, do click on the join button below. It will tell you more information about that. Or alternatively, do have a look at the Patreon page. It means a huge amount to me. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.